My name is Horace, and if you're listening to this, I want you to know something before I begin. I was never a greedy man. I worked hard all my life. I raised my son with dignity, and I believed in family above all else. But nothing could have prepared me for the storm that tore my world apart after my son died. It's strange how grief works. It doesn't come like a gentle tide. It comes like a raging flood, sweeping away everything you thought was steady and permanent. And in my case, grief wasn't my only burden. Betrayal soon followed. Betrayal from the very woman I once welcomed into my home as my own daughter. My son's name was Daniel. He was my pride, my reason to get up in the morning. Ever since his mother, my late wife Margaret, passed away 10 years ago, it was just the two of us. Daniel and I shared a bond that was unbreakable. He was gentle, thoughtful, the kind of man who lit up a room without even trying. He had married a woman named Clara 5 years before the tragedy struck. Clara, well, I tried my best with her. At first, she seemed polite enough, but there was always something cold about her eyes, something I couldn't quite place. I convinced myself I was being too critical, that perhaps I just missed Margaret and no woman would ever feel good enough for my son. So, I pushed my doubts aside. Daniel loved her, and that was enough for me. When Daniel passed, it was as though someone had ripped the ground from beneath me. He was only 30, 2 years old, gone far too soon in a car accident that left no room for last words or goodbyes. I still remember the night the police knocked on my door. Their faces were grim, their voices heavy. "Mr. Horace, we're deeply sorry." Those words still echo in my head. I collapsed onto the floor, clutching at the air as if I could somehow grab onto him and pull him back. Clara cried too, of course. Loud, dramatic sobs that shook her shoulders. But while I was swallowed by genuine grief, I noticed something unsettling in her eyes even then. It wasn't just sadness. It was calculation. For the weeks following Daniel's death, I tried to keep myself together by being useful. I cooked, I cleaned. I made sure Clara wasn't left alone. But soon her mask began to slip. One evening, barely a month after we buried my boy, she walked into the living room, where I was sitting quietly with Daniel's photo in my lap. She didn't sit with me, didn't ask if I was okay. Instead, she crossed her arms and said, "Horace, I think it's time you moved out." At first, I thought I'd misheard her. "Moved out?" I asked, my voice shaking. "Yes," she said flatly. "This is Daniel's house, and now it's mine. You can't stay here forever. I need my space, and frankly, I don't want to be taking care of an old man." Her words cut deeper than any knife. Old man. As though I was nothing more than a burden. I stared at her in disbelief. "Clara, this was my home before it was ever yours. I built this place with my bare hands after Margaret, and I married. And Daniel, he would never want me out on the street." She shrugged, cold as ice. "Daniel's gone, and I'm still here. If you think you're entitled to anything, you're mistaken. I'll make sure you're left with nothing. Not a penny. The lawyer is finalizing everything." Her cruelty took my breath away. That night, I sat alone in my room, my heart aching not just from losing Daniel, but from realizing that the woman he had chosen to share his life with was plotting to erase me completely. I wanted to believe she was just speaking out of grief, but her eyes told me otherwise. They gleamed with something dark. Greed, entitlement, maybe even hatred. In the days that followed, I tried to reason with her, tried to remind her that I was family. "Clara," I said one morning over breakfast, "we can find a way to live together, at least for now. You don't have to be alone." "And I?" She slammed her cup down, interrupting me. I said, "No, Horace. You're done here. Once the lawyer finalizes the inheritance, you'll be gone. Don't make this harder than it has to be." I wanted to shout, to fight back, but something stopped me. I knew there was more at play here than she was letting on. Why was she so eager to push me aside? What exactly was she planning with the lawyer? I had no answers then, only suspicions. And so, I kept quiet, biding my time, though inside I was breaking. Every night, I would walk past Daniel's empty room, the silence screaming at me. I'd sit on his bed and whisper into the air, "Son, I don't know what to do. She's turning your home into something unrecognizable. If you can hear me, guide me, please." And maybe Daniel did hear me, because just when I thought all hope was lost, the lawyer called. His name was Mr. Phillips, an old friend of mine and someone Daniel had trusted deeply. When I walked into his office, he looked at me with a strange expression, as though he already knew the storm Clara had unleashed. He gestured for me to sit down, and then he leaned forward and said words that changed everything. "Horace," before Daniel passed, he made some very specific arrangements in his will. Arrangements Clara is not going to like one bit. And in that moment, I felt a spark of hope flicker inside me, a glimmer of light in the darkness. Mr. Phillips' words rang in my ears, almost like a lifeline tossed into a stormy sea. I leaned forward in my chair, my hands gripping the armrests so tightly that my knuckles turned white. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice hoarse. The old lawyer gave me a long look, one of those looks that says, "You've been through hell, but hold on, it isn't over yet." He reached for a folder sitting on his desk, opened it slowly, and pushed a thick stack of papers toward me. "Daniel came to me a few months before his accident," he began. "He was concerned about Clara, concerned about the future. He wanted to make sure you would be taken care of no matter what happened." I blinked at him, trying to make sense of it. "Taken care of," but Clara told me. Phillips raised a hand to stop me. "Clara doesn't know everything, Horace. Your son was smarter than she ever gave him credit for. He left clear instructions, and a trust that ensures you will not be left penniless. In fact, Clara is the one who may be disappointed." My heart pounded. Relief began to seep into me, but so did a cautious unease. "What exactly did he say?" I asked. The lawyer adjusted his glasses, his voice steady. "Daniel left you the house. It is in your name now, not Clara's. She has no claim to it whatsoever. Beyond that, he ensured that a significant portion of his assets go into a trust for you, meant to cover your living expenses for the rest of your life. Clara, well, she was left with something, but far less than she expected." I felt my breath catch. The house, mine. The very home Clara had told me I'd be thrown out of. It was Daniel's gift to me all along. My son had seen through her, at least enough to protect me. Tears burned my eyes, but this time they weren't only tears of sorrow. They were mixed with gratitude. Mr. Phillips leaned back, folding his hands. "I must warn you, Clara will not take this news kindly. But the law is clear. The will is airtight." I nodded, swallowing hard. "Thank you," I whispered. "You have no idea what this means to me." Walking out of his office, I felt different. Stronger. For the first time since Daniel's death, I wasn't just a grieving father. I was a man who had something worth fighting for. But as I drove back to the house, a knot of dread twisted in my stomach. Clara would soon learn the truth, and I knew exactly the kind of woman she was. Her cruelty had already been exposed, and once her greed was denied, she would lash out like a cornered snake. That evening, I found her in the living room, her legs crossed elegantly as she scrolled on her phone. She barely looked up when I entered. "Did the lawyer finally confirm things?" she asked smugly. "Better start packing, Horace. You've got maybe a week before I change the locks." I took a deep breath, steadying myself. "Actually, Clara," I said slowly, "it seems Daniel had other plans." Her head jerked up, eyes narrowing. "What are you talking about?" I walked closer, holding her gaze. "The house. It isn't yours. It's mine. Daniel left it to me in his will, and not just the house. He made sure I would be provided for. You won't be throwing me out. Not now. Not ever." The silence that followed was deafening. Her face drained of color, then flushed red with fury. "You're lying," she spat. "That's impossible. Daniel would never. Daniel loved me." I cut her off. "He knew who I was, and maybe he knew who you were too. He wanted to make sure his father wasn't left on the streets." Clara's phone slipped from her hand and clattered to the floor. She stood abruptly, her voice trembling with rage. "No. No, this can't be true! I'm his wife! I was supposed to inherit everything." "That lawyer, he's wrong or he's tricking you. I'll challenge this. I'll fight you in court." Her words were sharp, but beneath them I sensed panic. She hadn't expected resistance. She thought I was weak, beaten down by grief, too broken to stand up for myself. And maybe I had been until now. "You do what you need to do," I said quietly, though my voice carried a firmness I hadn't felt in weeks. "But the will is clear. And Clara," I paused, letting her see the steel in my eyes. "I will not let you dishonor Daniel's memory with your greed. Not in this house." Her chest rose and fell rapidly, her hands curling into fists. She wanted to scream, to claw at me. I could see it. But instead, she stormed past me, her heels striking the floor like hammers. The door slammed behind her, leaving me in the quiet aftermath of her rage. I sat down slowly, exhaling deeply. For a brief moment, I almost pitied her. Almost. But then I remembered her words. The cruelty with which she'd promised to leave me with nothing. That wasn't grief speaking. That was her true self. And now her mask was gone. The days that followed were tense, like living in a house with a ticking bomb. Clara barely spoke to me, but when she did, her voice was coated with venom. "You'll regret this, old man," she hissed one night as she passed me in the hallway. "Daniel may have left you something, but I'll find a way to take it all back." I said nothing, but her threats lingered in my mind. She was plotting, I knew it. And though the will had given me protection, I wasn't naive. Clara was dangerous, and she wasn't going to give up easily. One night, I found myself standing outside Daniel's room again, staring at the framed photo of him and me on his graduation day. My hand trembled as I touched the glass. "Son," I whispered, "you tried to protect me, and I'll honor that. I won't let her destroy what you left behind. But I think this fight is only just beginning." And I was right, because Clara's next move was one I could never have predicted. One that would drag me into a battle far darker than I'd imagined. Clara's next move came faster than I expected. Barely 3 days after our confrontation, I received a notice in the mail, stamped with the seal of the county court. She was challenging the will. My hands shook as I tore open the envelope, my eyes scanning the legal jargon until the words blurred. Petition for contestation, fraudulent preparation, undue influence. She was accusing me, of all people, of manipulating my son into leaving everything to me. The audacity of it nearly knocked the breath from my lungs. I dropped into my chair, the papers trembling in my grip. For a moment, I just sat there, staring at Daniel's picture on the wall. My son had trusted Clara once, had believed in her love, and this was how she honored him. By turning his last wishes into a battlefield. I called Mr. Phillips immediately. His voice was calm, almost too calm. "Horace, I expected this," he said. "Clara's greedy, and greedy people are predictable. But she won't win. Daniel's will is airtight. I made sure of it myself. But she's accusing me," I said, my throat tight. "She's painting me as some manipulator." "Me? Her own father-in-law," Phillips sighed. "She'll throw mud, Horace. That's her strategy. But mud doesn't stick when there's no truth behind it. Trust the process. I'll handle the court. You just need to be prepared for the ugliness." Prepared? That word echoed in my head as I hung up the phone. How does one prepare to be dragged through the dirt by the woman who once sat at your dinner table, calling you died? That night, Clara came home late. I heard her heels clicking against the floor as she entered, the faint scent of wine following her. She didn't look at me as she tossed her purse onto the couch. "Enjoy your little victory while it lasts," she said with a smirk. "Because soon, everyone will see you for what you really are. A selfish old man who stole from his own son." I rose slowly from my chair, my chest burning with anger. "How dare you?" I said, my voice low but shaking. "Daniel trusted me. He came to that decision on his own. You weren't even there when he made those arrangements. Don't you dare twist his love into something ugly." Her smirk widened. "Well, see what the judge believes." Then she disappeared down the hall, leaving me fuming in the quiet house. The weeks leading up to the hearing were the longest of my life. I barely slept, haunted by the thought of standing in a courtroom, of hearing strangers question my love for Daniel. Every time I walked past his room, I felt the weight of his absence pressing down harder. Yet, there was also a spark inside me, a voice that whispered, "Stand tall, Horace. Don't let her erase his wishes." On the day of the hearing, I sat at the long wooden table beside Phillips, my palms sweaty. Clara was across the room, dressed in black as though she were still in mourning, though her sharp eyes told a different story. Her lawyer, a younger man with a polished smile, whispered in her ear as she occasionally glanced at me with that same icy disdain. When the judge entered and the proceedings began, Clara's lawyer wasted no time. He painted her as the grieving widow, robbed of her rightful inheritance by a manipulative old man. "It is unthinkable," he declared, "that a man of 32 would bypass his young wife to leave the entirety of his estate to his father." Clearly, undue influence was at play. My jaw clenched as he spoke, each word twisting the truth into something grotesque. Phillips, however, remained calm. When it was his turn, he stood and adjusted his glasses. "Your Honor," he began, his voice steady. Daniel was a man of foresight. He knew his father had no one else. He trusted me with his wishes, and I can assure you, there was no coercion. In fact, I have in my possession letters Daniel wrote himself, explaining why he wanted his father provided for above all. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Clara shifted uncomfortably, her fingers tightening around the edge of the table. Then, to my surprise, Phillips called me to the stand. My knees trembled as I walked up, every eye on me. When I sat down and placed my hand on the Bible, I whispered a prayer under my breath. "Mr. Horace," Phillips said gently, "can you tell the court about your relationship with your son?" I swallowed hard. My voice cracked at first, but then something inside me steadied. Daniel was my world. After his mother passed, it was just us. We did everything together. I never asked him for anything. All I wanted was to see him happy. When he married Clara, I welcomed her as my own, even when. I glanced at her briefly. Even when things were difficult. But Daniel came to his own decisions. He wanted to take care of me. That was his heart. He was always thinking of others before himself. I paused, my throat thick with emotion. Your Honor, I didn't steal from my son. I lost him. That's already more than I can bear. All I have left are his memories and his wishes. And I'll protect those with every breath I have left. The courtroom was silent. Even the judge leaned back, studying me with something that looked almost like sympathy. Clara, however, shifted again, her face stiff with barely controlled rage. Phillips presented Daniel's letters next, handwritten, signed, undeniable. As the judge read them, I watched Clara's expression crumble piece by piece. Her mask of mourning cracked, revealing the fury beneath. When the gavel finally struck, declaring Daniel's will valid and Clara's petition dismissed, I felt a weight lift off my chest. Relief flooded me, so overwhelming that I had to grip the table to steady myself. Phillips placed a hand on my shoulder, whispering, "It's over, Horace. You won." But as we stood to leave, I caught Clara's gaze. Her lips curled into a smile that chilled me to the bone. "This isn't over," she mouthed silently. And in that moment, I knew she meant it. The court may have spoken, but Clara wasn't done, no. This was only the beginning of a darker game she was about to play. One that would push me to limits I didn't know I had. I wish I could tell you that after the court's decision, life returned to some sense of peace. But it didn't. Clara wasn't the type of woman to accept defeat gracefully. No, she was the kind who nursed her bitterness like poison, waiting for the right moment to strike. And strike she did, in ways that tested not only my strength, but my very sanity. The first signs were subtle. I'd wake up to find small things out of place. Daniel's photo turned face down, important papers missing from my desk, the front door left wide open in the middle of the night. At first, I thought maybe I was just losing track, the toll of grief playing tricks on me. But soon, it became clear. Clara was trying to rattle me, trying to make me feel like I was losing my grip. One night, I confronted her. "Clara," I said, standing in the kitchen doorway as she poured herself a glass of wine. "I know what you're doing. You want me to doubt myself, but I'm not going anywhere. This is my house, and you will not drive me out with games." She smirked, swirling the wine in her glass. "Old man, you think a piece of paper and a judge can protect you from me. You have no idea who you're dealing with. You'll break, Horace. You'll crumble, and when you do, I'll be here to take it all." Her words slithered into my ears, cold and venomous. For the first time, I realized she wasn't just greedy. She was dangerous. There was a darkness in her that went beyond entitlement. It was hatred, sharp and personal. Weeks passed, and the tension only grew thicker. We avoided each other most days, circling like wolves in the same cage. But then came the night that changed everything. I had gone to bed early, exhausted from a day of fixing a leaky roof tile, when a strange sound pulled me from sleep. A faint crackle, a smell in the air, sharp, smoky. My heart leapt into my throat. Fire. I stumbled out of bed and down the hall. Smoke was seeping under the kitchen door. Bursting through, I saw flames licking up the curtains by the stove. My first thought was panic. "The house! Daniel's house!" I grabbed the extinguisher from under the sink and fought the blaze, coughing and choking as black smoke filled my lungs. It took every ounce of strength, but I managed to put it out before it spread further. When the smoke cleared, I stood there shaking, staring at the charred fabric, and that's when I noticed something. A bottle of lighter fluid lying on the counter. Not hidden, not tucked away. Left there, almost like a calling card. I confronted Clara the next morning, my hands trembling with fury. "You tried to burn the house down," I shouted, my voice echoing off the walls. She raised an eyebrow, feigning innocence. "Oh, don't be ridiculous. Maybe you left the stove on. You're forgetful these days." "Don't you dare!" I growled, pointing at her. "Don't you dare make me doubt myself." I saw the lighter fluid. "Clara, you wanted to destroy everything Daniel left me, but you failed. And I swear, if you ever try something like that again." She cut me off with a laugh. A cold, hollow laugh that made my skin crawl. "Or what? Horace, what will you do? Call the police? Tell them your sweet daughter-in-law tried to kill you? Who would believe you?" Her arrogance left me shaken. She was right about one thing. I had no proof, nothing that would hold up in court, and so I kept my mouth shut. But inside, a fire of my own began to burn. Clara had crossed a line, and I knew then that this wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about justice. I started keeping records. Every strange occurrence, every veiled threat, every word she threw at me. I hid a small notebook under the floorboard in my room, filling its pages with details. I also began meeting quietly with Mr. Phillips, who advised me to be patient. "If she's reckless enough, she'll slip up," he said. "And when she does, we'll be ready." Clara must have sensed I was preparing for something, because she escalated. One evening, I came home from the grocery store to find a for sale sign hammered into the front yard. My heart nearly stopped. I rushed inside, finding her lounging on the couch. "What is this?" I demanded. "Oh, that," she smirked. "Just a little reminder that nothing is forever. Houses can be sold, Horace. Maybe not legally by me. But do you really think a man of your age can handle the stress of a drawn-out fight over property? One way or another, I'll get what I want." Her confidence shook me, but not enough to make me falter. "You may think you're clever, Clara," I said, my voice steady despite the fear twisting in my gut. "But Daniel saw through you even if I didn't. And the truth always wins in the end." She rolled her eyes, sipping her wine. "Keep telling yourself that, old man." But as I retreated to my room that night, her words echoed in my mind. Maybe she was right about one thing. She wasn't going to stop until she had broken me. And I wasn't sure how much more I could take. What I didn't know then was that fate was about to hand me an ally, someone I never expected, who would shift the balance in this war. And when that person stepped into the picture, Clara's carefully constructed farce aid would finally begin to crack. That ally came on a rainy afternoon, when the world outside was soaked in grey and my spirits weren't much brighter. I was sitting by the window, staring out at the dripping branches, when there came a knock at the door. At first, I thought it was the postman, but when I opened it, I froze. Standing there was a young woman, her eyes red from crying, her coat clinging to her from the rain. "Mr. Horace?" she asked softly. "Yes," I said, cautious. She hesitated, clutching her handbag as though it were a shield. "My name is Evelyn. I knew your son, Daniel." Her voice cracked when she spoke his name, and something in me stirred. "Come in, child," I said gently, stepping aside. She walked in, dripping onto the floor, her gaze darting nervously around the house. I gave her a towel, and when she sat down, I could see the storm of emotions behind her eyes. She looked too fragile to be here, too shaken. "You knew my son?" I asked, my voice careful. She nodded. "Yes, She stopped, tears welling up. "I was his friend. More than a friend, if I'm honest. Daniel and we were close. He told me about his worries. About Clara, Her words were like thunder in the room. I leaned forward. What do you mean worries? Evelyn clasped her hands tightly. He didn't trust her. He said she was changing, becoming colder, more controlling. He confided in me that he feared she was with him for his money. He even told me about the will, that he wanted to protect you because he didn't believe Clara would. My heart hammered in my chest. Here it was. Confirmation of everything I'd felt, everything I'd suspected, but could never prove. And why are you telling me this now? I asked, my voice trembling. Her tears spilled over. Because Clara found out about me. She threatened me. She said if I ever spoke about Daniel, she'd ruin me. I stayed quiet. But after what I heard about the court case, I couldn't stay silent anymore. Daniel deserves the truth. I sat back, stunned. For a long moment, I couldn't speak. This young woman, this Evelyn, had carried such a burden alone. And now, she was risking everything to come forward. Evelyn, I said finally, you're brave to come here. What you've told me could change everything. But you must be careful. Clara is dangerous. Her eyes flickered with fear, but also determination. I know, but I can't let her keep destroying everything Daniel stood for. I owe him that much. From that day forward, Evelyn became my ally. She brought with her messages Daniel had written to her, scraps of conversations he'd confided, all painting a picture of his mistrust of Clara. With her help, Phillips began building a stronger case against Clara's schemes. But Clara, clever as ever, sensed something had shifted. She grew more restless, more erratic. I caught her one night rifling through my desk drawers, her face snapping toward me when she realized she'd been caught. What are you hiding? She demanded. Nothing that concerns you. I replied, my tone firm. Her eyes narrowed. You're plotting something. Don't think I don't know. I stood tall, meeting her glare. Plotting, no. Protecting, yes. And soon, Clara, the world will see who you really are. Her lip curled. You think some dusty lawyer and an old man can stop me? You're a fool. Horace, I've survived worse than you. I didn't respond. I simply turned and walked away, though my heart pounded in my chest. She was unraveling, and I knew it was only a matter of time before she snapped. One evening, Evelyn came over again. We sat in Daniel's old room, sifting through the letters she had brought. I could almost feel my son's presence there, his voice whispering through the paper. Evelyn looked at me with tears in her eyes. He loved you so much, Mr. Horace. He worried about you more than anything. I think, in some way, he knew his time was short. I swallowed hard, my throat thick. And he cared for you too, didn't he? She nodded silently. We were interrupted by the sound of a door slamming. Clara's voice echoed down the hall. Horace! Who's here? My blood ran cold. Evelyn's eyes widened with fear. Clara stormed into the room, her face contorting when she saw Evelyn sitting there. You, Clara hissed. What are you doing here? Evelyn rose, her hands trembling, but her chin lifted high. I'm telling the truth, Clara, about Daniel, about what he really thought of you. Clara's face twisted with rage. She lunged forward, pointing a finger at Evelyn. Get out of my house! Now, or I'll. Or you'll what? I cut in, stepping between them. My voice was steady, even though my heart was racing. Threaten her again. Destroy more of Daniel's memory. Enough, Clara. Your games end here. For a moment, the room was electric with tension. Clara's eyes darted between us, and I could see the fear flicker beneath her fury. She knew Evelyn's presence was a danger she couldn't control. With a scream of frustration, she spun on her heel and stormed out. That night, Evelyn and I stayed up late, going through everything she had. With every letter, every word Daniel had left behind, I felt closer to him, and more determined to see Clara exposed for who she truly was. And soon, the chance came. Clara, desperate and reckless, made one final move that would bring everything crashing down. For her. It happened on a night when the sky was heavy with thunder, as though the heavens themselves were restless. I had just finished reading one of Daniel's letters with Evelyn, when the sound of shattering glass tore through the silence of the house. My heart jolted. I rushed toward the noise, Evelyn close behind me. There in the living room stood Clara. Her hair was wild, her eyes bloodshot, and in her hand was a hammer. One of Daniel's framed photos lay shattered at her feet, shards of glass glinting in the dim light. "You think you've beaten me," she hissed, her voice jagged. "You think you can take everything from me." "No, Horace. If I can't have this house, if I can't have his money, then neither will you." My blood ran cold. Clara put the hammer down, but she only gripped it tighter. With a wild cry, she swung it toward the wall, smashing another frame. Daniel's diploma. Evelyn gasped, tears spilling down her cheeks. "Stop this," I shouted, stepping forward. "You're destroying everything Daniel cherished. Do you think this honors him?" She turned to me then, her face twisted in a mask of hatred. "Daniel loved me," she spat. "Not you. He was mine. And you, an old, useless man, stole him away, even in death. You'll pay for that." Her words were venom, but I stood tall, though my knees shook. "No, Clara. Daniel saw you for what you are. That's why he protected me. That's why you didn't get what you wanted. He knew." Her rage boiled over. She raised the hammer again, this time stepping toward me. Evelyn screamed. For a heartbeat, I thought this was the end, that Clara would strike me down in the very home I built with my bare hands. But then, headlights flashed through the window, tires screeched, and a voice thundered from outside. "Police, drop it." The front door burst open, and 2 officers stormed in. Clara froze, her chest heaving. The hammer slipped from her hand and clattered to the floor. It was Evelyn who had called them earlier, quietly. When Clara had first threatened her, I hadn't even known. Bless that girl, she saved my life. The officers restrained Clara as she thrashed and screamed. "He stole from me! It was mine! All of it was mine!" Her voice cracked, desperation bleeding through her fury. But no one listened. The evidence, the letters, her threats, it was all too much. She was led out of the house in handcuffs, her screams fading into the night. When the door closed behind them, I collapsed into a chair, shaking from head to toe. Evelyn knelt beside me, her hand gripping mine. "It's over," she whispered. "She can't hurt you anymore." Tears filled my eyes. Tears of exhaustion, of sorrow, but also of relief. "Thank you." "Evelyn," I said hoarsely. "You've given me back my son's voice. I thought I'd lost everything. But you reminded me I'm not alone." In the weeks that followed, Clara was charged with attempted arson, harassment, and destruction of property. The will was no longer just a matter of dispute. It was sealed beyond question. The house, Daniel's house, was safe, and so was I. But safety didn't erase the grief. At night, I still walked past Daniel's room, still felt the weight of his absence pressing down on me. Only now, when I whispered into the silence, "Son, I hope I did right by you," I felt lighter, as though somewhere, somehow, he was answering back. Evelyn became a regular part of my life. She wasn't just an ally anymore. She was family. We shared stories of Daniel, laughed and cried in equal measure, and in those moments, the house didn't feel quite so empty. One evening, As we sat on the porch watching the sun sink low, she turned to me. "Mr. Horace, Daniel loved you more than anything. And I think he'd be proud of you. For standing tall, for not letting Clara destroy what he left behind." I smiled faintly, my eyes misty. Maybe. But more than anything, I'm proud of him. For seeing through the lies. For protecting me even when he wasn't here. That's the kind of man he was. The wind rustled through the trees, carrying with it a peace I hadn't felt in months. Clara was gone, her poison stripped away. What remained was the legacy of my son. A legacy of love, of foresight, of loyalty. And so, this is where my story ends. Not in bitterness, though there was plenty of that along the way. Not in loss, though loss was the spark that began it all. It ends with gratitude. For a son who protected his father, even beyond the grave, for an unexpected friend who became family. And for the strength I never knew I had until I was forced to find it. Daniel's voice will always echo in my heart. His memory will always live in these walls. And though Clara tried to leave me penniless, broken, forgotten, in the end, it was her greed that left her with nothing. And me, I remain here, in the house I built, in the home my son defended with his final wishes, carrying forward the only thing that truly matters: love.